Let me just tell you, in free practice this morning, the American rider Kevin Windham was again fastest on his Honda. And incidentally, he's been joined not only by top American riders, but also by the reigning world champion. The first time we've seen him all year. Sebastian Tortelli, of course, won last year in Greece, the final heat of the year, and went to the US, as he had always intended to do, to ride for Honda. The #1 plate is here, 5 seconds to go, 40 minutes and 2 laps, which will take them about 2.5 minutes each, a 45-minute duration we're aiming for here. The revs rise, and who will get the best run into the first corner? Kevin Windham and Robbie Reynard fastest in qualifying, and Windham again fastest from Tortelli in the morning warm-up. Pete Byra's #3 shows well, but it's Everts that leads. Everts gets the whole shot into the first tight chicane. Stefan Everts clearly determined to start 1999's winter season with victory here in the last round before they go to the Motocross of Nations, where undoubtedly he will star again for Belgium. And this should set him on the road for a 2000 championship win, unless, of course, he goes to 500s, which is the rumour. Well, never mind all that. Stefan Everts blistering away. Pete Byra hot on his heels. But Byra could do nothing at all about the pace of Everts in the German Grand Prix, nor indeed could anybody else. And I wonder what they'll do here. It looks as though the #5 of Fred Bolle is in 4th place now. Byra drops down to 3rd. So Byra already starting to slip down the order. Well, getting ahead of him there momentarily. 57 was Brian Jorgensen on the BFE Suzuki. Well, Stefan Everts, can he contain his enthusiasm and excitement here and run away from it? Or will this man be able to do what he needs to do, which is win both Grand Prix? Everts ahead of him, Byra in 2nd place. For him, it's important to find out where Bolle is. If Bolle has a problem and doesn't score, then that will be very good news indeed for the German rider. There was a clash on the previous corner. Somebody got slammed up into the outside, into the advertising hoardings. Couldn't quite pick out who it was. We may have to wait until the end of the lap to see just where Bolle is, but no doubt about where Byra is. 2nd place and losing time to Everts. Well, as you can see, conditions are ideal here in Budds Creek. Maryland enjoying a hot early fall. 28 degrees was the average temperature through the practice days. The track looking superb. The German Grand Prix, of course, started on a very wet track. The organisers had spent days putting thousands of litres of water onto a bone-dry track to keep the dust down for practice, only then for the heavens to open all the way through the event. A real disaster for them. But here, as you can see, it's shorts and singlets for the crowd. And it's going to be a very tough, hot, debilitating race for the racers. Well, Stefan Everts, 26 years of age, of course, and the man who had the World Championship snatched from his long-term tenure last year by Sebastian Tortelli. The Frenchman took it in the last round of the championship, probably against the odds. Tortelli had been battling Everts all year, but in the end you would have to say maybe Everts' experience would be the deciding factor. In the end, it wasn't. Looks like Marco Keväläinen in 3rd place as the field streaks through. There is Fred Bolle. Well, the cameraman trying to pick him up, the director looking for some assistance from the spotters out on the track. Finally, they found Bolle. Seem to have lost everybody else. There's Byra. Just trying to see, in fact, it can't have been Byra because Bolle is far too close to him, and he didn't seem to be that close before. So that may well be Marnik Berberts just ahead, the 2nd of the Winfield Kawasaki machines. There is Byra, looks to have a healthy machine, probably just got completely caught at the start. They rush down to the tight right hand and then immediately very sharp, more than 180-degree left-hand hairpin is really tricky. And, of course, that just helps if you don't get the ideal start to really mire you down in the midfielders. Well, Bolle seems to have shaken off a number of those, certainly. Looking pretty smooth. Here we go. 2.3 is the advantage. Ryan Hughes in third. The American Wyndham, who was on pole, just in 5th place. Well, Michael Pichon has had a heat win this year, 2nd on the podium in Belgium 2 Grand Prix ago. So the Frenchman in 4th place behind Ryan Hughes. But it's the battle between Beira and Bolle that will make all the difference. Down there in 11th place, Sebastian Tortelli. So the reigning champion, who has come back from a wrist injury, is really struggling a little bit here. He's just in the group that you're looking at there. In fact, I think there was Mark Jones heading that, and behind him, Michael Machiot. Watching Fred Bolle now, starting to try and pick up places. Ahead of him, 57. And that is Brian Jorgensen. So Bolle now looking for 6th place. And the gap is unlikely to get any smaller unless, for some reason, Stefan Everts has a problem. And that doesn't seem hugely likely. Bolle chasing, and he is closing on Jorgensen. Beira bringing the gap down now to 1.7 from 2.3 seconds, so he's starting to close now on Stefan Everts slightly, half a second closer at the intermediate. Of course, depending on exactly where that intermediate is, that may be because the race leader has just had a little problem. But again, the gap starting to come down again, 1.7 to 1.6, just another 10th, but he's picked up 0.6 of a second. Hughes still in 3rd from Pichon. So Ryan Hughes holding on to that position, looking for a podium finish here. But this is rightfully, I think, what the organisers' director is looking at now. The battle with Fred Bolle in 6th place. 10.5 seconds all but between Beira and Bolle. But the most important thing for Pete Beira is how many positions there are between them. If Beira's going to assume that he's going to win this one, and he really must, he can't allow for Stefan Everts winning it and for him to trail in behind. That 5-point difference between first and 3-point difference between first and second would be really a big margin at this stage. He's got to find 20 points advantage over Bolle this weekend, which means 1 clear victory. He needs to win a heat with Bolle failing to score, and then match him on points in the second heat effectively, which obviously isn't physically possible, but that's what he needs. Coming down now to nearly half a second behind Everts, things getting closer. Eurosport live at the US Motocross Grand Prix at Budds Creek. You're looking at the race leader and the man chasing him, the man who would be the champion if he gets a chance, and that is Pete Beira. Well, Stefan Everts' margin was 2.3 seconds at the end of the first lap, 1.6 at the end of lap 2, 0.7 seconds at the end of lap 3, and then went back out again to 1.8 seconds. So Pete Beira in second place, closing right up onto Everts' tail, and then clearly having a small problem. And Beira needs desperately to catch up to and pass the former multiple champion, but that is no easy task, as every single 250 motocross rider in the world well and truly knows. Beira, not the least of them. Well, in third place, still Ryan Hughes. Fourth place, Michael Pichon. Fifth place, the best of the Americans, Kevin Windham, and in sixth position, Brian Jorgensen, the Dane. He's being chased by Fred Bolle, and as you can see, they're 12.5 seconds behind Beira. Well, that's important for Beira, but more important, as I mentioned, is the number of places between them. For Beira, he just can't hope for Jorgensen to hold off Bolle long enough. To keep Bolle down in seventh, even if Beira doesn't win this heat, would be at least some comfort. But he really does need to. Well, the mathematics are not the sort of thing that we need to go into here. At the end of this first heat, we will know whether Beira can or cannot win the championship in the final race of the year. Looking further down the order, there's Greg Albertine, one of the number of American riders brought in here by Honda. The Suzuki team deciding not to bring their riders, and Kawasaki likewise, which may be an advantage to the Honda riders. Fred Bolle particularly, if the Americans on their Hondas and Sébastien Tortelli, the Frenchman who is the reigning world champion, could deny Pete Beira points, then that would certainly help Honda rider Fred Bolle. Bolle, the championship points leader here. And the battle for the title is all about them, but for victory, Stefan Everts is always the first man you look to, whatever the conditions, whatever his condition. And there had been some questions raised during the season about just how long it would take him to get back to race fitness. Well, he's certainly answered those in Germany, with a win and a second place in the two heats, and taking victory overall in just his third Grand Prix back from his almost season-long layoff. Ryan Hughes in third place, and Michael Pichon there, very close together indeed, and chasing Pete Beira. But look at the gap there. You were waiting a long while there for Kevin Windham, the American, to come into shot, and he still didn't. Further back, the Dane Brian Jorgensen with Fred Bolle behind him. There is Sébastien Tortelli, first sign of the reigning champion, and he is ahead of Fred Bolle. That is not right, because at the end of the last lap, they were showing Tortelli in 11th and Bolle ahead of him in 7th. Now, let's get much further down the order. Jorgensen still in 6th. Well, that much is clear, but either Tortelli has strapped turbochargers onto his machine, or Bolle has had a big problem. And that could be very, very important indeed. Unless I'm reading the number wrong, that sure looks like a number 1 on the back of the machine ahead of Fred Bolle. Certainly doesn't seem to be Jorgensen, whose 57 machine looks completely different. And the Suzuki rider was in 6th. Here, the Radson Honda of Fred Bolle, who should be chasing him and should have been right behind. We need to go further down the order. Pichon and Windham, still no change. Jorgensen still in 6th. Further down the order, please, with the graphics, would be very handy indeed for us to figure out what on earth has happened to Fred Bolle. Well, he's finished his 5th lap, but in what position? Passing message here. Well, Tortelli is up into 7th. Well, that is absolutely astonishing. Tortelli up into 7th place. Bellametti down into 9th place. Can't quite figure how Sébastien Tortelli has managed to do that. That's absolutely astonishing piece of riding from him. Working his way up from 11th place at the end of the first lap, ahead of the faster European riders. Clearly showing that despite his injury in the middle of the season, the man who won last year's World Motocross Championship and led the American 250 series in the early season has lost none of his abilities. Greg Albertine, the reigning American champion, tied it up at the last round, not featuring so strongly here. Sébastien Tortelli only finishing in 12th place. And then he was out of action from midway through the season and has only just returned to riding fitness. As you see, the gap Everts to Beira remaining pretty static. And that means that the former champion is certainly capable of keeping that up. We saw in the German Grand Prix that his level of physical endurance, which has always been exceptional, is right back where you would expect it to be. He certainly lost no pace and lost no amount of concentration at all in the closing stages of either of the heats in Germany. Was pretty much as quick at the end as he was at the beginning, and that speaks volumes for the amount of training in terms of stamina that he's been able to do during the summer. Well, Bolle in 8th, so he's slipped a position. And as far as Beira is concerned, that's very good news indeed. Still plenty of time on the clock though. Over 20 minutes plus the 2 laps at the end, and that will take them the best part of another 5 or 6 minutes as well. Still plenty of time for Beira to mount an attack on Stefan Everts. Still plenty of time for this man on the number 5, Frederick Bolle, to work his way back up the order. Interesting to see what will happen when Tortelli gets on the tail of Jorgensen, because Bolle followed him for the first 3 or 4 laps quite closely and couldn't really make any impression. Beira now again right with the race leader, Stefan Everts, coming towards us here. Lead quartet very close together still. I wouldn't like to suggest that they're being held up at all by Stefan Everts. Far from it. I think Ryan Hughes and Michael Pichon riding superbly at the moment. Right with these two guaranteed front-running crowd pleasers. Plenty of crowd on hand here as well. The American AMA season has finished, and so they have had a full summer of exposure to motocross in the States, and of course before that the Supercross Championship. And I'm sure a lot of interested fans of this beautiful venue in Maryland coming out to see what the European stars can do against their boys. Well, if they were expecting the Europeans to be a bit of a walkover for the Americans on home turf, then it has certainly proved not to be the case. This looks to be about as close as Beira has been to Everts so far. 1.2 seconds, and the closest he's actually been on the stopwatch has been 0.7 of a second, so maybe another couple of bike lengths closer. But Everts seems to have this well under control at his own pace. 7 laps down, and no sign of his pace wavering. Yet to encounter any traffic, of course, but that's never really seemed to be much of a problem for Stefan Everts. He sides through it. Of course, having Everts come up behind you is always pretty much like having a Senna or a Schumacher behind. Back marker traffic seems to part rather magically for him. Bolle in 8th. Jorgensen now down to 7th, as up into 6th place has gone Sebastian Tortelli, and the reigning champion make it onto the podium. We'll find out as we continue after this. Eurosport Live at the US Motocross Grand Prix, the first heat here from Budds Creek. There is your race leader, as he has been right since he got the whole shot at the start of the heat. Stefan Everts out front. Behind him, though, in 2nd place, no longer Pete Beira. The German Championship challenger was passed on the last lap by Ryan Hughes, and Hughes has now moved up into 2nd place. So Ryan Hughes pushing Beira rather, down the order, away from Everts and a race win, and closer slightly in the points table to the 8th place man, Fred Bolle. Up into 6th place has come Sebastian Tortelli, 18 seconds behind the leader, some 12 seconds behind 5th place Mark Windham, Kevin Windham rather. So Bolle down there in 8th place, And the rest of the top 10, as you can see there, pretty much static. But the big mover has been Ryan Hughes. Unfortunately, the cameras didn't pick it up until the move was complete, so we don't get a chance to see that. But the American in second position, and you can see the local fans waving him on, much the same way that the huge German crowd waved on Pete Beirer last time. Didn't help Beirer too much at his home Grand Prix. Ryan Hughes third at the start in the first half dozen laps, and now moving up into second place. Hughes currently lying fourth in the championship, and he's just 13 points behind David Villemin. Villemin not in the top dozen here. He was fifth quickest in qualifying, David Villemin, but has not shown at all strongly here. And in fact, we haven't seen him as they've run down the order anywhere at all. Beirer to Bolle, third to eighth, 21.8 seconds. Looks as though Pete Beirer is pretty much safe from attack from behind by Bolle. And again, it's adding up at the points, and you will excuse me if my rather feeble mental arithmetic doesn't try and calculate exactly how it will all sort itself out at this stage. Still a quarter of an hour and 2 laps left to go. So well past the mid-distance now. Hughes 3.3 behind, and Beirer under pressure from Wyndham. He could really do without this, and it looked there as though Wyndham was making a move on the inside. Cameras follow Hughes, and it looked as though there was a flash of red and yellow going through there. Still Beirer. Is it just? Yes, it is, but Wyndham all over the back of him. Well, the Americans, with their man Kevin Wyndham, fastest in practice and fastest on the Sunday morning warm-up timesheets. Looking perhaps for 2 Americans on the podium here. At the moment they got second and fourth. Beirer really desperately needs to avoid getting behind another of these guys. Second place wasn't quite what he wanted, but it was better. Beirer under pressure from Wyndham. And the German rider really starting to hit trouble here in the second part of this first heat. Doesn't seem to have any mechanical problems, but the American all over the back of him. So 19 points the gap between Pete Beirer here in third place, and down in eighth place the championship leader Fred Bolle. 20 points for a win, and at the moment Beirer on target for 15 for his third place. Fred Bolle still inside point scoring range, but he will only get single figures if he doesn't get back up inside the top 6. And that will allow Beirer to close to a manageable gap, possibly by the end of this heat. If he can finish this heat less than 10 behind, then he has got a real chance. It does seem that Bolle very much out of sorts in this heat. Bolle showed plenty of speed in the morning warm-up though. He was third quickest, and just under a second slower than Kevin Wyndham, the fastest man in the warm-up. Pete Beirer, in contrast, only 8th quickest, and some 2.5 seconds slower than his rival. Well, they were also outpaced by the Americans in qualifying. Bolle was 7th quickest, Beirer only 11th fastest. And it really looked as though the German was in deep trouble. 2.5 seconds quicker than the rest of the field in Germany. Didn't parlay into a dominant victory for Pete Beirer. And that's where the championship turned around. He went there with a narrow lead and came away really battling for survival in this points race. Grand total of 40 points on offer, but the margin between first and second is just 20 points to 17, so only 3 points difference. Beirer couldn't possibly afford to finish behind Bolle here at any stage, but if Bolle just stays close enough to Pete Beirer, and he doesn't even have to pass him, he can just do it on the points gap. You can see though Beirer is far from given up, just flying over the brow there and taking off a tear off. Now right behind him there, Wyndham and Pichon. And those two, the quickest men in the qualifying session, along with Robbie Reynard, the American on the Suzuki. Well, Reynard not showing at all well here. Pichon and Wyndham battling away for 4th place. So Stefan Everts just a couple of seconds ahead of the battle for 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, because effectively they are all pretty close together, and one slip by Ryan Hughes and he could have the 3 chasing men go right by him. And there you can see Stefan Everts shooting out a shot every time the camera pans around in this little hairpin section with Ryan Hughes. Byra with him. And 4th place Wyndham, as close to Byra as Byra is to Hughes, all but. Byra really closing here. And doesn't seem to be able to take advantage as they come over the finish line. Again, the gap opens right up. Well, just to slightly correct the caption, Bolle not in 3rd but in 7th, Byra not in 7th but in 3rd place. Wouldn't want to argue with the time difference between them. Confirmation there that Byra is still in 3rd, as the pictures are showing you. Tortelli in 6th and closing a little bit. Greg Albertine now up into 8th place ahead of Jorgensen, so he's really started to pull his way up the order. Reynard down in 13th. Marnik Bervert's well down the order as well. And then a number of the American riders down in the 20s there. That's where you see a few more of the AMA Championship riders there. Peter Ivan just barely in the top 20, as is Pasquier there and Mark Eastwood at the bottom of the table. And Byra again really looking for a way to get back on terms with Ryan Hughes. He held Hughes off for 15 minutes and now he just can't get back to him. Doesn't seem like an awful big advantage that Hughes has. Not a huge distance, but Pete Byra seems unable to close it down for any length of time. Stefan Everts with 11 laps of the first heat of the American Motocross Grand Prix under his belt, leading by 5.5 seconds from Ryan Hughes in 2nd place. Championship contender Pete Byra in 3rd. Not where he wants to be, but at the moment it seems to be the best that he can manage. The only good news on Pete Byra's horizon is that Fred Bolle, the championship points leader, is still down there in 8th place. There is Byra, the number 3, the Winfield Kawasaki rider. And right behind him on the 114 Honda is Kevin Wyndham. He was the fastest man throughout practice and is now finally starting to make his mark here. And it does look as though Byra may slip down to 4th place. Again, Wyndham closing on him. Byra had a comfortable advantage a couple of laps ago. The American fighting right back. Well, Hughes, of course, a regular in the World Championship, but Wyndham, his first meeting this season with these guys. And again, you saw him there just trying to make a move on Pete Byra. He likes to go on the tight inside line. We've seen him do that several times before, and again he does. Byra sacrificing that inside opportunity for maximum speed around the corners. At the moment that seems to be working. The Kawasaki rider though, this is a really tough time He can just see Ryan Hughes ahead of him all the time, quite clearly. But he's now nearly 10 seconds behind Stefan Everts. And it really does look as though victory here is beyond his reach. Well, for the team run by Jan de Groot, they would certainly like to take another championship. Last year, they took the 250cc title with Sebastian Tortelli. Won it back in 1995 and won the 125 title in 96 as well. With Pete Beirer, they still have a chance of doing it this season. But for Beirer, time's starting to tick away on his chances. Well, Bollé in 7th place, unable to make any ground at all. Sebastian Tortelli caught and passed him quite comfortably. Greg Albertine in 8th place, maybe a bit of a threat for Bollé as well. Certainly he's been working his way up the order. The 26-year-old from Johannesburg, a regular US rider. Rode 125s in Europe in 1990, won the title in 92 with Jan de Groot. Of course, running Pete Beirer. And again, won the 93 250 title with Jan de Groot on a Honda. But he couldn't get enough factory interest and eventually made his way back to the States. Made his way initially to the States on a privateer machine, having beaten Stefan Everts. Albertine, one of the real stars of the American scene for the last few years. He may just be able to help Beirer's situation here by getting past Bollé. Well, Beirer again looking pretty fired up right now. Got a good run in the last few corners. Away from Wyndham and much closer to Ryan Hughes. And right within charging distance now. Beirer has got his second win, no doubt about it, in the last lap. Well, looking to go down the inside of Hughes, you could see how tight he turned in the last hairpin and how much ground he lost as a result. And again he does it, and again he loses ground, and again Wyndham gets closer to him. Ratson Honda of the championship leader Fred Bollé. And there behind him, if the camera will pick it up properly, I think we should see Greg Albertine. So Bollé having to keep his act nice and tidy. And here he is again, coming under pressure. And does he succumb? Yes, he does. So Bollé goes back down to 9th place, Albertine up into 8th. Now what can he do? Can he fight back here? Or is that position well and truly lost? Well, his teammate Stefan Everts out front, leading the race. Well, the cameras have not picked up a move there. So these guys, 7th and 8th. 7th place changing hands here. And the replay showing Albertine coming over the rise on his own there. But the position lost for Bollé is a few points out of his advantage, chipped away. Here is his teammate though, the race leader Stefan Everts. And Everts won't have looked over his shoulder beyond the end of lap 2, I shouldn't have thought. By that stage he was starting already to shake off the challenge of Pete Beirer. By the end of lap 4 he was 2.5, 3 seconds away from him. And by that stage Beirer was starting to have to worry a lot more about Ryan Hughes than he was being able to concentrate on Stefan Everts. And Everts now miles away on his own. We've seen him do this so many times. And again, Everts in fighting form, back, doing it once more. Coming towards us, second, third and fourth. And again, Ryan Hughes with just a second and a half, possibly 2 seconds over Pete Byrer, not much more than that. And in fourth place, Kevin Windham, the similar sort of margin between Byrer and himself. And those three have been locked together, while Everts has just run away with it. Well, it's a very worrying prospect for 250 riders if Stefan Everts doesn't go to 500 and comes back to the World Championship in this kind of form next year on the basis of just the last 3 heats, 2 in Germany and 1 here in the USA. There wouldn't appear to be any catching him again. Similarly, of course, I'm sure 500 riders would be quite happy for him to stay in 250. Perhaps they fancy they can handle him on the big stroke as well. We'll wait and see if that rumour does come to fruition. And if he does go to 500s, I'm sure the 2000 season in the 500 class will be a very, very interesting one. Meanwhile, Stefan Everts with no championship pretensions and no title battle weighing him down as it was at the closing stages of last year's championship. Just happy to romp away and show that he is still arguably the best 250 crosser in the world. You'd have to argue pretty strongly to come up with a better name for that championship, or for that accolade. With his string of championships behind him, Stefan Everts' ability to turn it on time and time again, almost unmatched. Well, Byrer now, again, unseen by the cameras, passed and down to 4th place. Didn't see Kevin Windham get by him, but the graphics showing there as they cross the line, Pete Byrer down to 4th. So Ryan Hughes in 2nd place for the USA, Kevin Windham in 3rd for the USA, Byrer off the podium, and that is very bad news indeed for the German. He drops another couple of points from 15 to 13. And his rival, well, down the order, but close enough to limit Byrer's ability to really take back the initiative here. So Albertine up to 7th, Bolle in 8th. They both passed Jorgensen unseen by the cameras. And there is the proof. Byrer in 4th place, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, going over the rise. And the German rider now trailing 2 home heroes. And Ryan Hughes looks as though he may be in trouble for 2nd place. Kevin Windham with something to prove here after being fastest in practice and then struggling to match that pace early on. Now really seems to have got to grips with the whole deal. And there he is. So Windham closing on Hughes. Honda in 3rd place. Honda leading. And Honda in 2nd. So it's all looking fairly nicely poised for the manufacturers in terms of all going Honda's way at the moment. In terms of the championship, though, for Kawasaki and for Pete Byrer, 4th place, not what they would have hoped for. And unless these 2 Americans are going to chop each other down in an ill-advised clash in the last couple of laps, for Pete Byrer, I think 4th is the best that he can possibly hope for. Ryan Hughes in 2nd place. Kevin Windham in third place. And on to the last couple of laps. Battle for national honours here as the best American. So they've got about half a lap remaining before they get what the Americans would term the white flag lap, being both of them cheered on by the home crowd. Stefan Everts, 8.5 seconds, or 8.2 away. That'll be better part of 10 seconds by the end of this heat. Just one lap to go as they cross the start-finish line. And the glory of being the top American finisher here as they go past the first of the back markers, David Villemin. And if you wonder why Villemin is back there, a former Grand Prix winner this year, twice, it's because we believe that he took his spare bike at the start. So Villemin having to race a backup machine. Believe that is the case, certainly. And the blue number 99 struggling his way round. And that won't help his championship chances too much. He's not in line to be first overall, but in third place he's hoping to hold off Ryan Hughes for that place in the title race. And he may not do it with Ryan Hughes' form here. Villemin won't score. Ryan Hughes at the moment likely to score 17 points, and the difference between them was just 13. So it will all go down for third place in the championship to the second heat. Ryan Hughes, though, holding off Kevin Windham at the moment. As they fly under the banner here, they will start their last lap, as the leader already has. Second and third look certain to go to the American pairing, but how they sort it out, well, I think Ryan Hughes really has the upper hand. Kevin Windham hasn't been able to get close enough to get alongside yet. I don't think Hughes is going to give him the option here on the final lap either. Pete Beyer in fourth place, and he needs to hold on to that. Pichon some way behind, 5 seconds behind Beyer, so that looks pretty safe for him. Sebastian Tortelli, 6th place. Not what you might expect for the reigning champion. Don't forget, he is riding this weekend for the first time after coming back from a mid-season injury. Broken wrist put him out of the American Series. And he spent the week leading up to Budds Creek doing promotional work for the team, as opposed to actually being able to get out there and train and ride. So, rusty. And perhaps a little in pain here in the closing stages, but still Tortelli came up the order into 6th position. And so returning to the saddle with at least some alacrity. Greg Albertine, 7th place, and Fred Bolle still in 8th. Stefan Everts rolls out the final few hundred meters of this first heat of the American Grand Prix. And he has just been absolutely uncatchable. Quite where he managed to hide this pace during qualifying, Lord only knows. Because, well, in 6th place in the qualifying stakes, he wasn't really that close to Kevin Windham and Robbie Reynard, the fastest pair, the Americans. But certainly he's managed to show them a clean pair of heels in the race. Absolutely destroyed the opposition. Whatever else the American fans here at Budds Creek get in Heat 1, it won't be an American victory. Having said that, obviously, assuming mechanical disaster doesn't immediately intervene. But Stefan Everts in the closing stages, and the fans cheering him round the last lap, around the last 2 corners. And he will take big air across the finish line, winning the first heat at Budds Creek. Stefan Everts wins. In 2nd place, I'm sure it will be Ryan Hughes. And in 3rd, Kevin Windham. Pete Beyer, it looks as though should have held on to 4th place. There is the man who's 3rd, Brian Windham. Ryan Hughes should have been in 2nd place. Cameras didn't follow him over the line. And unfortunately not showing us quite where Beyer or Bolle are finishing. At the moment, though, it looks as though Beyer will take 13 points towards closing down his 19-point disadvantage to Fred Bolle. And Bolle, if he finishes in 8th, will take 8 points. So that closes the 19-point gap by just 5 points by my mental arithmetic. For now, it's bye-bye.